Everywhere I've gone in life, I've always been inadequate in everything. Oftentimes, I don't even know what I'm doing wrong because I'm really just trying my best, but it's never good enough for anybody. And I'm always being told that I'm doing something wrong and that, I'm not supposed to be doing this, I'm not supposed to be doing that, even though I try my best, I show up, I try to do the best work that I can possibly do. But no matter what, it just is never good enough for anybody. And it's especially disastrous because, as a man, people will only care about you if you're useful and if you can provide something, if you can be strong, if you can protect, if you can provide. But for me, I've always tried my best. It's not that I don't try enough. I consider myself a very hardworking person. I've literally worked myself to the point of exhaustion many times, in many things, but I'm always doing something wrong apparently. And it's hard because I feel like I understand the logistics of things pretty well. But the thing is that, the entire life that I've lived has made me become a person who thinks too much and is not able to act enough. And everywhere I've gone in life, I was always bad at everything, every single thing. I was always inadequate in everything. I was always, I'm short. I'm 5'6". Back then, I was even shorter. I was always skinny. I was never good athletically. I wasn't ever good at making friends because I was socially awkward and socially stunted because of all the various abuse I've faced from so many people, including extended family members. I wasn't attractive. I was unattractive. The one thing I was at least good at was school. I was at least good in school. I would get honor roll multiple times. Teachers would use my work as an example of what to do, right? They would compliment me in front of the whole class. But, as the years went by, as the various hardships I faced made things worse, my health got worse, my mental health got worse, things got more and more terrible in terms of, social rejection. People started rejecting me more, etc. Eventually, I wasn't good at that either. And, I'm now at the point where I basically lost everything I used to do well in school, like I said, but because of my poor health issues, I have chronic fatigue, which has left me disabled basically and bedridden at times. I wasn't able to continue through university. I don't have a job. I basically spend the whole day not really doing much, just trying to keep myself busy with whatever, whenever I can. But there's just nothing I keep myself busy with keeps me busy for longer than an hour usually. But that's how it is. And the thing is that I've often asked myself, why am I always inadequate at everything? But I think I know why. It's because I'm always figuring everything out on my own, and the cycle I've encountered is I make a mistake and people punish me for it, they criticize me for it, and then as a result, obviously, negative reinforcement that just makes me make even more mistakes because they're not teaching me how to correct it. And then the cycle continues, and it's always been that way with everybody, even authority figures. That's all people have ever done is just criticize me and punish me for existing. I seriously never learned anything. Nobody ever taught me anything. When I look back at my entire upbringing, it's not the kind of upbringing that produces a successful person. It really isn't. And yeah, sometimes I like to read Wikipedia pages and autobiographies and different informative pieces that explain the childhood, the upbringing, etc. of heinous criminals, because I think it's interesting to read into what led a person to becoming this kind of person. And the thing is, I don't mean to sound edgy, but when I read these things, it's really kind of jarring because their stories are not that different from mine at all. All the things they went through, all the experiences they had, that's exactly what my life has always looked like as well, exactly as theirs has. And I'm not saying that means that I'm going to become one of these people. I know it's always about your choices and all of that, but it is pretty telling because it makes sense why so many people in my place end up in places that they never wanted to be, because they fell through every possible crack in society. They were never supported by any institution, by any establishment. Everybody failed them. And that's what I think to myself as well. When I look back at my entire life, everybody failed me. Nobody taught me, and all anybody did was hold me back, and all anybody did was criticize me. I literally did not learn a single thing from anybody. But nobody spent the time to actually sit me down and teach me anything. All anybody did was just criticize me, or just flat out ignore me, or just flat out abuse me, harshly punish me, verbally, physically, whatever, just whatever it is. And I was left to figure it out on my own. But when you're figuring it out on your own, every last thing that you do is a trial by fire, and every last thing that you do is going to end up in failure, because you're always figuring it out on your own, and there's nobody there to, fill in when you're not able to. That's how it is. That's why it's so difficult. But wherever I go, I'm always being told I'm doing something wrong. A thing that I told myself from a very young age is that, like I said earlier, a few minutes ago, you have to be useful as a man. You have to be capable. You have to be able to provide something. You have to be strong. So I told myself that, if I were to maybe help others, if I were to not be like the people who bullied and abused me, if I were to help others instead, then maybe I could be accepted. But, of course, as per usual, I'm always doing something wrong. And it turns out that it's not that simple, because that's what they tell you in the movies and the TV shows, right? If you suffer, you have to break the cycle. You have to be better than the people who hurt you, and you have to give back to other people the things that were never given to you, and it'll come back around to you. But whenever I do it, it turns out it's not good enough, and I'm actually doing something wrong. So I tried doing that, but because I was so desperate, because the situations, the circumstances I was coming from were so dire, right? Because I was so desperate, ended up taking it too far, and I ended up developing a savior complex. And obviously, like I said, I'm always figuring it out on my own, so it's not like there was anybody to hold me back from that becoming the case, right? Because I was teaching it to myself. And when you are abused, it teaches you, the thing about abuse is that it teaches you to think in extremes, right? I must do this, or this will never happen again. I must never do that, or this will happen again. Just all or nothing kind of thinking. That's what happened to me. I thought to myself, if I really want people to accept me, I just have to be capable of just helping everybody, just being there for everybody, people pleasing basically. But this caused me to develop a savior complex, where I was too desperate to help, and even trying too hard to help in situations where there wasn't even really much to fix, or it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. And in turn, I ended up repelling people even further. But that's the thing. I don't think anybody gets to blame me, because I'm figuring it out on my own, and I have chronic fatigue in the first place because I overworked myself. I was so desperate to just be stronger, to be successful. I overworked myself in school. I overworked myself in exercise, and now I'm exhausted. I was bedridden last year as well. It has gotten a bit better, but I'm still, exhausted, and I know it can fall back to that point at any time. But like I said, it's because of that all or nothing thinking. But I was led to that point because I told myself, if I'm inadequate, maybe I just have to work harder, and if it's not enough, I have to work even harder. But there was nobody to teach me that, you have to be human as well. You need to be energized by relationships. You need to be energized by fun. But what do I know about fun? I don't know anything about fun, because why should a person like me, who's bad at everything, who's useless in every area of life, why do I get to have fun? If I'm having fun, I'm wasting time, because I've not done anything that warrants me having fun. So I have to keep myself busy first. But it's never good enough. And that's why I told myself that if I help others, then maybe finally I can be useful. The thing is, though, is that ever since late 2024, I no longer have a what do you call it, a savior complex anymore, because eventually I realized that it's not really my responsibility to go around helping everybody. And ultimately, first of all, to help others, you have to have something inside you first. And ultimately, it isn't your responsibility to fix things for people. You can help, but to help doesn't mean to solve the situation for them. It doesn't always mean that. They ultimately have to figure it out on their own, and you could just be there, but then it's up to them to figure it out. And in general, I was too naive. I was too gullible. Way too many people took advantage of that, because I ended up making my entire reputation in front of people as the guy who's just always there listening to people. In the pandemic, it was as if I was people's therapist, right? To the point where all people ever did was take advantage. And the thing that I had to learn the hard way when I was very young, a teenager, is that there's a difference between giving and being taken from. And I thought I was giving, but I was just being taken from instead. But now I always have to be really careful. But you know, when only after you've suffered really badly will you realize just how much work goes into every area of life, and how honestly difficult everything is, and how many logistics are involved in everything. There's so many little unspoken rules that, you know, you would otherwise not even have to care about, because if you're happy, if you're normal, if people love you, you wouldn't have to care at all, because you're on the inside. Only when you're on the outside will you realize that, you know, there's so many little unspoken rules that your character doesn't even actually really matter that much when it comes to being socially accepted. It's just about whether or not you're attractive, charismatic, making a lot of money, like I said, being useful and adequate, right? Because, you know, even today, just today, right, I went with my parents to uh as of recording this video today, even today, I went with my parents earlier this afternoon to this plaza, right? Because we needed something from there. It was a plaza a little bit away from home, and there was a homeless lady, you know, on the begging outside of the stores, right? And at first, the thing is that there was something off-putting about this lady to me, because my family and I have been to this plaza before. uh and the thing is that this plaza is also the place where there are a lot of extremely luxury jewelry stores and high-end restaurants or whatever. So I mean, there was something. It's not like we were here for that though, but I mean, we were there for a grocery store. But I mean, uh there was something about this lady that was off-putting to me. And even as I was walking past her, I just kind of, you know, stood firm, and I just kind of walked past her, not really giving her much. But as we walked out of the grocery store, my dad handed me, you know, a $2 coin, a toonie, as we call it here in the great north, right? Canada. But he gave me a toonie, and he told me to go give it to that lady, because whenever there's a beggar, he just tells me to do it. So I did, and I gave her the toonie. But as I walked, and she thanked me and everything, but as I walked away, there was this man who approached me, and he told me not to give it to her. And she said, don't give it to her. And I said, why? Is she fake? And then he said, yeah, 100% she's fake. And as soon as he said that, she immediately just started, as fast as possible, getting out of there. She walked away from there as fast as possible. And then he turned back to me and he said, see, when I called her out, she ran away. And, you know, I mean, how was I supposed to know? First of all, it was my dad who told me to give it to her. I didn't even want to, because I could tell there was something off about her. But in the end, I didn't want to assume anything, because, you know, how do I know? You know, what really does tell me? The thing is, like I said, I've seen her here before, so I feel like it's a strategy to pretend to be homeless at a plaza where a lot of rich people likely are, because that's how you will get money at a plaza that is also, you know, in a very largely inhabited, because like I said, there's a lot of luxury restaurants here and everything. But I mean, I didn't know. That's why I was just kind of ignoring her, because I just said, you know, I'm just going to walk past her. It's not my responsibility. Like I said, I don't have a savior complex anymore. But my dad asked me to go give it, so I did. But apparently no. And I think this man maybe worked at the plaza, because he could tell, and he said that she's fake. But yeah, this is exactly it. I tried to do the right thing, and then I'm being told that apparently I'm doing something wrong. But how am I supposed to know, man? I was just trying to do the right thing. And yeah, he was right, because this lady just started running away like a coward immediately after. If I go back to that plaza, I'm actually gonna go up to that lady and tell her that she's a pathetic loser, and what she's doing is extremely dishonorable. But, you know, to pretend to be homeless, that's an awful thing. It's pathetic, really. That's all it is. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I know people are gonna tell me, oh, but that doesn't speak anything about you. You still try to do the right thing. But that's always how it is. I always try to do the right thing, and somebody is just taking advantage. That's always how it's always been this way, man. You know, I even remember there was this one friend of mine, after we graduated. This was in the few months after we graduated high school. This was back in late 2022, early 2023. I graduated high school in 2022. There was this friend of mine that I knew from high school, throughout high school. And you know, he, in the few months after we graduated, he told me that he was feeling lonely, because after graduating high school, pretty much everybody just went off to college and made new friends. But you know, I still checked in on him, and even he said that, you know, it's amazing that I'm doing that. And he said that he was really appreciative of the fact that I was doing that. And the thing about him is that he was taking a gap year, right? But then in early 2023, he joined this program, this gap year program, where you basically go abroad and you try out a university program. for a year and see if you like it, and if you want to stay, you stay. So he did that, and he went to Australia to do it, to study, I think, biology or medical health science, something like that. And up until then, we would message each other, but the second he went there, he made new friends. And I know because he posted pictures of himself with them, and when he did that, he stopped speaking to me and acted like I didn't exist. And you know he just stopped messaging me, and I was the only one reaching out to him, even though I was there for him during that time. He was lonely, but I realize now that he was never lonely. It's just that he's a person who goes from person to person looking for entertainment. He doesn't want friends, he just wants entertainment, and it's just about who entertains him the best. And he found people who are more entertaining than me, and he just abandoned me. Same thing, I just can't ever win, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because we were friends since the first year of high school, and he still told me he was feeling lonely. I know all about loneliness. I'm an expert on that at this point. So I was there for him, but then the second he makes new friends, he abandons me. And yeah, I blocked him, and I never spoke to him again, and I'm never going to speak to him again. I think he's a really mentally weak person anyway. If because people like him don't know what real loneliness looks like. I've literally been abused by everybody my whole life, and I'm serious, basically nobody really cares about me. If I died tonight, I don't really think that many people would care or be upset at all. But this guy, for a few months, some of his friends don't speak to him, and all of a sudden, I'm lonely. You don't know anything about loneliness, man. It's just pathetic. But that's how it is. It's always been this way everywhere I've gone. I try to do something right. People just take advantage of me for it. And it's just, I'm always being told I'm doing something wrong. And in everything, just I don't know why it's not ever good. And I even remember when I was a kid, I used to do swimming classes. Really little kid, I was in elementary school. The swimming instructor, she hated me, and she would always tell me that I'm not good enough. She was confused how I even, because it was in levels, right? You would go through levels, and you would graduate from one level to the next, and it would get more and more complicated each time. And I actually managed to make it to a pretty high level for my age. I was in third grade at the time. I think I was 8, 9 years old, and she was confused how I even managed to do it. And I was the youngest in the class, and the swimming instructor, she just kept picking on me, constantly wondering why I'm even here, telling me I'm doing something, just getting up in my face, criticizing me. And I even remember there was just one day she was trying to teach us some maneuver, I think some diving maneuver, and everybody in the class was not really doing such a good job. And this instructor, she was a really impatient lady. Eventually, she lined us all up on the wall, and she went around, screaming, literally screaming. And she pointed at everybody, and she said, this was halfway through the term. And, by the end of the term, the instructor says if you passed or failed. If you failed, you had to redo that term, whatever level you did. If you were at level 3, you had to redo level 3. But I mean, otherwise, if you pass, you go on to the next level. And she said this was halfway through the term. She said, okay, here's which one of you are passing and failing. And she kept going around, like I said, loudly screaming, really aggressive, pointing, literally pointing at people's faces like this: pass, fail, pass, pass, fail, fail. And when she got to me, she pointed at me like this, and she said, fail, literally an inch away from my face, and she said, fail. I don't even think she was looking at me. She was just screaming so loudly. And to hear an adult tell you fail when you're just a kid halfway through the term, like I said, negative reinforcement. What reason do you have to keep trying? And like I said, I know people are gonna tell me the platitudes, because people always want to act like they know better, right? Oh, you should have just kept trying. I was 8 or 9 years old, and if an adult is telling you you're failing, that gets set in your mind. And yeah, chances are I did fail. Chances are maybe I could have passed, if I had been given a better support, but I wasn't. And there was still half of the term left, but I just told myself, well, if I'm already failing, what's the point? And I was a little kid in third grade. What else do you think? Every time, this is how it always is, every single time. But for me, losing is a lot more than just failing at, obligations, extracurriculars, friendships, whatever. Just, I always, yeah, I've been abused by people so much throughout my whole life, and I've never gotten any justice, any closure, any apologies. I explained the story in a previous video of mine where I talk about my extended family and being bullied and abused by them. But I had a elder cousin who was like a sister to me, much elder, a good 10 years older than me. She betrayed me. I badly got myself hurt, and she and her siblings laughed at me while I was injured with a bleeding foot. I had my childhood best friend. I might actually make a separate entire video just dedicated to him. My childhood best friend who was like family to me. We did everything together. He ended up becoming highly narcissistic, and he would constantly harass me about my poor social skills. Eventually, I stood up to him and I told him to stop, and he stopped doing that. But even after that, he still tried to take advantage of my kindness because I was willing to forgive him because I didn't want to let go of our friendship. But when I saw he was doing that too and I stopped speaking to him, then he left, but he never cared about me, not one single time, even though we were friends for 10 years. That's always how it's been. Even some of my bullies were once friends of mine. And, in my first year of high school, I was horribly bullied. I was also physically bullied. There was one physical assault from a student that left me with a bruise on my arm. And in the final year of high school, the school got involved and they started conducting an investigation. The police got involved as well, right? But then, I remember this was in November, December 2021. In my final year of high school, the school counselor would speak to me regularly because I had to recall a lot of distressing events. They would take me out after school every single day to, ask me to recall events. And the school counselor, he would speak to me, and I even remember telling him that I don't really see what can be done. I was only 17 at the time. I didn't really understand how any of it worked, but I told him, I don't really see how anything can be done because it happened years ago and there's no evidence. But he promised me that something could be done, and I don't think you're supposed to make promises in situations like these. But, he promised me that something would be done, and I just held on to that because I was just losing in every area of life. I just wanted one thing to go right, just one win for God's sake. And then, months later, in February 2022, they told me that the person who did it, he's currently suspended and he's most likely going to be expelled as well. But then literally a week later, they called me again, and the vice principal, who is now the principal at the time, told me that, it's all expunged and that they cannot actually really do anything because of a lack of evidence. And that's literally what the complaint I brought up with them months before. And they gave me that hope, and now they're telling me that nothing can be done. And that person to this day is doing perfectly fine. And here I am, not doing anything with my life alone, with chronic fatigue, still suffering from depression, all of that, all the memory of the things that happened to me. That's always how it's been every mile. I can't win at a single thing, not even one thing, not one thing. Even when it comes to YouTube, I started uploading on YouTube months ago. I'm still not monetized yet. I can't even make money from here. And I've seen so many people who have started around the same time as me. They have hundreds and thousands of subscribers. They're monetized. They're doing everything right. But for me, I cannot do that. My videos don't get too many good views anymore. And they were doing well at first, but of course not now, not anymore. But same thing, I'm figuring this out on my own like everybody else. And yeah, like I said, I find it really hard to believe that out of all the 8 billion plus people that have ever been alive or will be ever alive or have been ever alive, I don't really think that everybody has the even chance to win or succeed. And I know people, I don't know if I said this really at the beginning of the video, this whole segment, but I know people are going to tell me that, yeah, maybe it's true that not everybody has the even chance to win or succeed. You just have to find whatever version of success is available to you. But I don't think not everybody's capable of finding that version of success. I think some people are not meant to succeed at all, because the thing is that I do kind of think that there's no such thing as a truly useless thing, because even something that has no purpose, if you think about it, has purpose because it creates that vacuum that needs to be filled by something else that is more useful, right? And it's just a stepping stone to that other thing. But that's exactly, some people are just stepping stones to another thing, another person, but they don't have anything for their own story. They're not even the main characters of their own life. That's how it is, and that's their whole life. That's what they've been put on this earth to do. And I honestly think so as well, because it's actually insane just how badly I lose, just how awful my circumstances are, just how defeating it is. And then people want to talk about learned helplessness and all that. How, of course, yeah, how could you not have learned helplessness when you're like that? But I have no idea. I think I'm just going on and on about the same things, and I kind of feel like I do that in every video. I try to end my videos off with a positive, hopeful note, but first of all, I stopped believing in hope years ago. After that incident with the school, I stopped believing in hope many years ago because hope is just a waste of time. I truly think that, if you're an outcast like me, the only real way you can ever succeed is by going your own way and creating something on your own, and creating something that you are basically the boss of, that you manage, that you create. Because I don't think that there's any system or any institution that can help me. A common thing that I sometimes put in my comment section, maybe some of you have noticed, is not to give unsolicited advice. I might make a separate video talking about this too, but I really hate unsolicited advice. But even when it comes to advice in general, I know I might sound stubborn, but I don't really want people to give me advice in the comment section of my videos. You can share your own thoughts and experiences, but I would appreciate if you didn't give me advice, because I've always had to figure out everything on my own. And now, after all the things I've gone through, I really don't think I want anybody coming in here acting like they can help me, because it's too late. You should have been there when it counted, but you weren't. So don't try to be here now. I have to figure it out on my own. I'm always figuring it out on my own, but that's what's taught me to be strong. That's what's made it so that I'm even still alive to this day. And I just need that stubbornness. I need that anger, that bitterness. It's the only real reason why I'm even alive to this day. And I'm going to try to make something, and I'm just going to try to reach out to the right people, because there is no establishment or institution that cares about my success or will ever care about my success. And most people probably just want me to be rotting in prison or out on the streets. I don't think anybody is actually rooting for me at all. I have to figure it out on my own, as always. But the thing is that I said that not everybody is here to succeed. The thing is, though, is that we're never actually truly aware of that. And as long as you're not actually aware of that, there's no point in thinking about it, because you truly never know if you're at what you're actually meant for or not. And the price of never achieving it, it's not worth paying that price. It's better to just suffer and suffer and suffer endlessly until you reach there, because maybe you might be one step away from your breakthrough. It's always better to just keep trying anyway. But I need to be smart about it, and I know that just recklessly throwing myself into the same things, just trying to help people without, you know, actually looking at what I could be doing to not be taken advantage of, isn't going to make anything different. Because I don't think I have to be a rude or bitter person, as bitter or as rude as everybody else. I just need to have more strength behind my kindness, because, you know, it's better to be a person who thinks and acts instead of a person who just acts without thinking, or just thinks without acting. And you need to be able to say no. And like I said, there's a difference between giving and being taken from. I still want to give, but I don't want to be a person whose kindness can take advantage of. So I have to become as strong of a person as possible. And strength is ultimately the only thing that really matters. But I hope somebody relates. I hope this could reach out to the right person. And yeah, thanks for watching.